Hey there, folks! It's another episode of the Processing Blue podcast where Alex can't stop smiling through an intro to save his life. Hello, he's a Panthers reporter. I'm Mike Kaye. I'm your Panthers beat reporter for the Charlotte Observer, and we have combined forces to process blue for you. Yeah, I didn't know if I was going to stick the landing there either, but here we are. The Panthers are getting ready for their week one battle against the Jacksonville Jaguars, or as I call it, the Millennial Bowl at the stadium that someone else built. The Panthers are basically the NFC mirror of the Jaguars who are in the AFC. And, you know, they've got a lot in common. They're in the midst of their second branch of ownership. Both of them have not really been postseason regulars. They both have quarterbacks who are first overall picks. They've both been covered by me, so it's just like a lot of commonality there. But something we all have in common is we all like Alex Zietlow. Alex, how you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing great. You hit me with these like questions right out of the blue. Like I'm trying to be
how are you doing?
Well, no, but like you hit
what a zinger.
Well, no, but like it's just waterfall of information about Jacksonville, which is really cool, and you did it in a succinct way. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yeah. And anyway, Alex, how are you? And it's like, okay. I mean, I'm great though. I appreciate you.
You didn't succinctly, relitigate what I said right there, but that's okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
Anyway, Alex, a lot going on here. There's that scene in The Office where Michael Scott's like talking about a vasectomy, and he's like, flip flop. Well, Hunter Renfrow flip flopped on and off the roster this week, but that's not the biggest news entering week one. Obviously, last week we talked about the Adam Thielen trade and the likelihood that Hunter Renfrow could return. Now, Jalen Coker's on IR. Hunter Renfrow needs to step up. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the other big news on offense is Ike Ekwonu underwent an emergency appendectomy last weekend. He is sidelined. Everybody who talks is basically like he's iffy for this week. He didn't sound too, worried about long-term play for him when we talked to him on Monday. But there's a chance that Josh Nijman or Brady Christensen is the starting left tackle. The Panthers are doing this thing where they're like, hey, check out Josh Nijman over here, to the point where like the beat writer in me is like, so what aren't they showing us? And so I do wonder if Brady Christensen is in that conversation at left tackle. What do you think the situation is with Icky, having talked to him Monday? And then also, how confident do you feel that either Nijman or Brady Christensen can step up and step in against Jacksonville?
Well, first on the subject of Ike Ekwonu, I thought that you were going to say something to the effect of Ike talked to reporters on Monday and didn't sound all that optimistic to play week one, in which I would say, yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I got too. I know that I'm kind of reading between lines and splitting hairs and stuff, because ultimately on the record, what he said was, I'm sticking to my plan that the coaching and training staff have for me, and we'll just see how it goes. But on Monday's practice, all he did was light jogging and some like very minimal individual workouts, at least in the public view for the reporters to see. He was working out with Jonathan Brooks and
Jalen
Coker, who recently got put on IR for a quad injury. So that's not the best company to be in. I mean, they're great guys and great football players. That's not what I'm saying. It's just like, that's not the best company to be in from an injury standpoint if you're Ike Ekwonu, particularly someone who, if he does play, is probably going to play every single snap on that left tackle side. The good news is that Damian Lewis is essentially back. We don't know how much of a participant he was on Monday's practice, because they'll release an official injury report on Wednesday per the league, and we'll figure out if he's a full participant, limited participant, or if he didn't play. However, we do know on Monday that he was not wearing a red no contact jersey, so we assume that he was full contact and probably full participation as well. That's great news for that left side of the line. To your question about can Josh Nijman and Brady Christensen step in, with a plum in Icky's stead, I think so. They're not Icky Ekwonu. And I know that Ekwonu has gone through a lot of how you say, adversity through his first 3 years in Carolina, but the intangibles that he has, the improvement that he's shown, I think, in training camp and in these joint practices and in the very minimal things that we saw in the preseason, it would be a downgrade for anyone else. I know you're a big Brady Christensen guy. I am also a big Brady Christensen guy, but this does not spell great things for the Panthers to not have Ekwonu out there.
Yeah, I would agree. Sorry, I was on mute for a second there. I agree with that. I think Yash is more of a natural right tackle and Brady's more of a natural left. And largely because I also think that from, Yash's standpoint, he's a much better run blocker than a pass blocker, in my opinion. And so that's what that is a little bit more like describing Icky too, right? Like Icky is a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. My concern, and I talk about this with John Shipley of Jaguars on SI later on the show, is like, how are you servicing the quarterback? And I think that's the key, because we know Chuba Hubbard can run through a line that isn't ideal necessarily. Bryce Young's kind of struggled when he hasn't had great protection, and I always kind of think back to that Washington game where anything that could go wrong did go wrong, even with Andy Dalton behind center. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. I think Brady Christensen is a much better guy in space. I think he's a much better pass blocker. That's where I would go. But I also think, there's stuff that we don't see. They've got a very smart offensive line coaching staff. And it's a group, it's a collective. It's not just one guy. It's not just Joe Gilbert. It's not just Harold Goodwin. It's both of those guys. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But another thing that I'm really interested to see play out is the Jalen Coker, Hunter Renfrow, Adam Thielen, switcheroodle do, whatever you want to call it. So here's what happened. Jalen Coker last Thursday injured his quad, going up and leaping for a grab in padded practice. He's had a history of soft tissue injuries, hamstring, groin, quad, you name it. Some of that is getting used to the heat down here. It's still pretty hot in Virginia and near the DC area too, but these training camps can be pretty brutal, speaking from experience. And I think that's something that would discourage me a little bit, especially from a conditioning standpoint. They obviously have a new training staff here. They are looking to get the most out of their guys. Last year, Jalen Coker even kind of admitted that he wasn't up to par coming from Holy Cross to the NFL, which is kind of understandable because it's going from Holy Cross to the NFL. They bring back Hunter Renfrow. They sweeten his deal. He did have interest. He has both admitted to that. I've reported that. There was outside activity. However, as you wrote earlier this week, it was probably going to be the Panthers or nothing for him. And so he had to wrestle with the fact that, hey, maybe, after this comeback attempt, this is a sign that things might not work out. Yeah, there are other teams interested in me. Why aren't the Panthers pushing over? I mean, there's a lot to get there. So they gave him an incentive-laden deal that he can make up to $3 million. That's still a pretty cheap deal, especially considering you trade away $7 million when you traded away Adam Thielen, or you gain $7 million when you trade away Adam Thielen. Dave Canales has gone on record on the Panthers website that Hunter is going to start in the slot, and that makes sense because largely the reason why you would cut him if you had Adam Thielen is he can't really play special teams outside of returning. So I don't know how you make him active on game day. Now, if they have a designated spot for him in the slot, which is what they need with Jalen Coker out and Adam Thielen gone, he's a set of reliable hands, experienced hands. They obviously still have David Moore, friend of the program, Tetsuo McMillan, Xavier Legette, who apparently made a really impressive play in Monday's practice to start the week. Look, I think it's really interesting that you go from he had peaks and dips and was cut from the 53 man to immediately being like, oh, hey, here you go. Here's the slot situation. I do think it's a nuanced discussion. I'm not making light of it, but I do think we need to temper our expectations here, mainly because I agree with Canales. When he came back from injury, he did not look as fast or as smooth. And the preseason, while he was getting thrown, hospital balls, still didn't look that great either. You cut the guy. Now he's a top 3 wide receiver. There is going to be some stuff to figure out here. What's your take on this whole situation, Alex?
I hear everything you're saying, Mike. I will just add 2 addendums. The first is that slot position is something that Bryce Young. Well, let me back up. 2 things. First thing, that's life in the NFL. There are a long list of players in the Panthers locker room who have stories like this. Oh, I was cut from the team or released from my previous team, and then 2 weeks later I was brought on, and after a slew of injuries I was starting. I wrote about that when Chris.
I mean, that's really Cade Mays.
Well, it's Cade Mays, it's Chris Barnes, who I
From
wrote
the practice
about.
squad.
Who's now on the practice squad. Yes, he's still in that Panthers locker room, because the practice squad guys are also in that locker room. But so that's life in the NFL, and it happens occasionally. And Chris Barnes, I imagine, is going to be a guy who gets elevated early. He might even get elevated for week 1 if the Panthers need some linebacker depth, or if they need him for special teams or what have you. So I understand the confusion or the whiplash of it all, of like, wait, you didn't want Hunter Renfrow, and now all of a sudden you want him to be your starting slot guy. I get that, but like you're saying, with special teams and all these things and the injuries, it makes sense why he would be starting, I think. Secondly, another caveat is, yes, Bryce, this Panthers offense is supposed to run through Teteroa McMillan, at least the pass game. That is what we have seen in the preseason, and that is what Dave Canales wants to do. He wants the X receiver to be targeted the most. Good. But Bryce is really comfortable throwing to guys in the slot. At least he was with Adam Thielen. And maybe it's because Adam Thielen was actually quite remarkable. But I think a lot of Adam Thielen's resurgence had to do with the fact that Bryce was just more comfortable throwing shorter routes, at least at the beginning of his NFL career. And that was still the same last year before Adam Thielen got hurt. And Jalen Coker comes in and he emerges once in Adam Thielen's injured stead. So I say all that to say, yes, we should temper our expectations with Hunter Renfrow. He didn't look as good after the injury in this offseason and in the preseason. But he's still going to get his chances, because I think that's just how Bryce Young and his offense works.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with him being inserted there. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm just saying I would temper your expectations, being like, I think the expectations for Coker once you traded away Thielen were pretty immense. I think this is a different situation. If I'm the Jaguars and I feel good about my nickel situation and my safety situation, I'm making the Panthers throw the ball to the outside, and I'm going to pressure them with my 2 first-round talents on the at edge rusher. So with that said, let's turn to my interview with John Shipley of Jaguars on Sports Illustrated. And we are joined by the great John Shipley, who covers the Jaguars for Sports Illustrated. John, we've known each other for a really long time. The Kaye Pipeline Bowl is upon us. It's the second time since I've been in Carolina that we have a Jacksonville-Carolina matchup. And what I always find interesting about these two teams is they're basically born together, right? They are the true millennial fan base teams. You know, you and I know of people that are from California that just like the helmets of the Jaguars or the Panthers and latched on to these teams. We like to give Alex a hard time on here because he claims to be Gen Z, but he claims to be a millennial, but we very much know him to be Gen Z. How is the fan base right now of millennials and Gen Z feeling about this new look Jaguars, which seems like a very Gen Z operation?
Yeah, I think that if there was one thing that Jaguars fans wanted to come out of the nightmare scenario that was last year, it was a new voice and some change. You know, when Shad Khan originally had fired only Doug Peterson and he had Trent Baalke sitting in the end of year press conference on Zoom, you know, like a like a hostage, basically alluding to, oh, I might still fire this guy. Who knows? It very much felt like a very panicky 2 or so weeks for a fan base, just because, fair or not, and it's fair in some senses, unfair in other senses, Bulky kind of just represented a unwillingness to change and unwillingness to get with the time. So I think once the Jaguars kind of sever ties there, they're doing things now that they just haven't done. Like, they haven't hired the young hotshot play caller to be head coach before. Obviously, Doug Peterson had play calling experience, but he was more known as kind of a seasoned veteran guy, steady hand. They haven't hired, the young, analytically focused general manager who will do things a very different way. Obviously Dave Caldwell was, a young general manager candidate when they hired him, but Gladstone, I mean, they don't even do top 30 visits. They just do things in such a unique way that most other franchises that aren't the Rams don't do. So I think if anything, Jaguars fans are excited just because it's something different. It's change. It's something that the Jaguars just haven't done, because I mean, they've tried all sorts of things. They've gone to, bringing back an old relic from the past and Tom Coughlin. They went to the storied college coach route in Urban Meyer, which lasted about 13 games. They went with the former Super Bowl winning head coach and former, nearly Super Bowl winning general manager and Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke, and nothing really seemed to click. So I think the feeling around the fan base is an excitement, because whether right or wrong, whether it'll work or not, they're at least trying something new now. They're not banging their heads against the wall, going back to the well.
Well, and I think something with the Jaguars, like the Jaguars always seem to be in a state of flux, but so does Jacksonville, right? I feel like I text you every time I visit the area and I'm like, man, the amount of construction here, how much this has changed since I've been there is wild.
Wait till Sunday, baby.
Yeah, I bet. They have a brand new facility. Well, not brand new, but it's relatively new. It wasn't there when I was there from 15 to 18. And when I visited, when I covered the Eagles. So the first time I saw it was when I came to Jacksonville for, obviously, the infamous drink tossing experiment.
CJ Beathard Bowl.
The CJ Beathard Bowl, right. So something that they did do interesting, and the Jaguars maybe not directly, but indirectly impacted the Panthers with how they handled the draft this year. They trade up to number 2 to get Travis Hunter. The Browns trade back to 5, take Mason Graham. The Panthers end up with Tetairoa McMillan, who is the second wide receiver, quote unquote, off the board. Travis Hunter was a big gamble to trade up for. I understand his talent is off the charts and he can do a lot of things, obviously play corner and wide receiver. How do they plan on using Travis Hunter from a snap count standpoint on both sides? And then, how is he integral to what they do?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to play more offense than defense, and that's not because I think that's what he's better at or even they think what he's better at. I think it's clear that he's a better cornerback than wide receiver, at least right now. I mean, as a cornerback, I've had the hot take before. I've said that if he played only cornerback this season and that was only what he was focusing on, I think he'd be, near a top 10 corner in the NFL by the end of the year. As a receiver, you can see that the athletic traits are the exciting part, but the nuances of the position, route running, just a little technical thing, still has a long way to go. But it really seems like their thinking and their philosophy is just that he can impact the game more on offense than that corner. And part of me, still disagrees with that to an extent, because just seeing how, fantastic he's played at corner. And then part of me, I for example, I'd watch him at corner. He'd practice corner 3 or 4 times in an 8 to 9 practice stretch in training camp. You'd seen him get a ball thrown at him maybe 2 or 3 times. He very rarely got tested during training camp. And then you see him when he goes to offense and, they're making him a focal point, lots of screens, lots of option routes over the middle. He's their slot receiver. They're putting him in motion a lot of design touches that they can design the game to come to him, for him to have a tangible impact through their own actions when he's on offense. When they're on defense, he's a great player, but I mean, if the ball simply goes away from him the other way, he's not making as much of an impact. So because of that, I do think he's going to play mostly offense. I do think he'll play defense. I've been saying that I think he'll play probably about 80%, 75 to 80% of the offensive snaps and about 60 of the defensive snaps. Like, I'm not sure he'll necessarily start week in and week out on defense. I think that he'll definitely be used in certain situations, and they'll have certain scripts where he's out there with the starting defense, but you mostly saw him with the backup defense during training camp. Though I will say, I think he has a case of throughout the season. I think his role could change week to week, depending on what they need, depending on if they need him more at receiver or cornerback that week. But I think if they had to, just say what a normal week looks like, I think it's a focus on offense while not ignoring defense, but still kind of leaning more towards the offensive side.
This, we mentioned the game a couple of years ago. This offense looks completely different, as it tends to be when you have a new GM and a new head coach. But gone are Evan Ingram, gone is Christian Kirk, gone is Gabe Davis. Trevor Lawrence has a favorite weapon in Brian Thomas. Obviously, Travis Etienne's still around. What do you make of this offense? What do you make of Trevor Lawrence heading into week one?
Yeah, I think that the Liam Cohen effect has to be what really drives the offense. Shotgun 70 fired Doug Peterson. That he thought they were the most predictable team on both sides of the ball, and that he thought coaching was the direct reason why. And I think with Liam, what he excels at is being unpredictable, just because he, throws so many different things at you that will look like the same look pre-snap, and then he'll just build upon it 3 or 4 different ways. Several players have told me since Liam got there that this is the most extensive playbook that they've had in the NFL, pretty much by far. So I think that they're really going to be leaning on Liam's influence and his schematic expertise to kind of drive the offense. I think the screen game is a big part of that. The Bucs were the best screen team in the NFL last year. Baker had nearly 1,000 yards off screens, whereas the Jaguars, they definitely did screens high in terms of volume under the last regime, but they were always one of the worst teams in terms of efficiency on screen. So I think just bringing that in, bringing some easy buttons in for Trevor Lawrence, and that's the big thing with Lawrence. You could tell that whether it was a lack of run game, whether it was injuries at receiver, whatever it was, Lawrence has played football the last few years. He thinks he has to score the game-winning touchdown on every play, and that every play has to be the play that saves the team, brings them back from whatever deficit they're in. And it simply isn't. So I think if Liam is going to be a success in Jacksonville, he has to build, really a schematic, environment around Lawrence where Lawrence can just play football, where he can just take the 5-yard checkdowns, where he can get into a rhythm with quick games. So he doesn't feel like he has to push the ball downfield or, break the pocket and try to score the game-winning touchdown on every single play. And Lawrence, to his credit, there are definitely, as with any quarterback in a new scheme, some up days, some down days, throughout training camp, throughout the offseason program. But during the preseason, it was about, it needs to be prefaced with it's the preseason. They didn't face many starters, but it was about as good of a preseason as he's ever had. It looked like he's getting the ball out of his hands quicker. They've made an emphasis on cleaning up his footwork, which has kind of been a mess the last couple of years. So I think Cohen, it remains to be seen how he will be as a head coach, but I do think he will ultimately be a net positive on Trevor Lawrence, which at the end of the day, I think is the main thing that they're looking for out of this hire.
I brought up Travis Etienne earlier. Obviously, his brother Trevor was drafted in the 4th round by the Panthers. They are stoked about him. He played nearby at Florida for a few years and also nearby at Georgia. So, he has seen both ends of the spectrum of Everbank Field from the Florida-Georgia perspective. And for those who don't know, it's a neutral site game every year. They play at Everbank Stadium, which was formerly TIAA Bank Stadium, which was formerly Everbank Stadium. What's the feeling on Travis? It just feels like from the outside looking in that he was basically buried locally before this training camp, and he has been able to retain his status seemingly as the number one guy. What's the story on him?
Yeah, I think when, the Jaguars, when it kind of, became clear that they're not looking to get into any long-term deals with him, he's playing on this contract year. I think a lot of people saw that as, okay, former 1st-round pick, contract year. They drafted 2 running backs. They have another running back in Tank Bigsby. This guy must be the expendable guy because he's, 1, the most expensive, and 2, he's the one who, his deal is coming up the quickest. It definitely seemed like over the course of training camp, though, that I personally think out of they're two veteran running backs for him and Tank Bigsby. He's actually a better fit for what Liam Cohen wants to do. And they have a really kind of oddly constructed running back room in the sense of if you could combine all four of their guys, you'd have a pretty complete back, but they all have very specific strengths and weaknesses. Like ETN, we just talked about screens. He's a great screen guy. He's a natural receiver out of the backfield, really good in open space. But in terms of the consistent downhill runner, can he beat a workhorse? It's a legit question. Tank Bigsby, he can punish you downhill. He can beat a workhorse with a running game, but he's legitimately probably one of the, worst passing game, running backs in the NFL. He has, I think, 8 career receptions. He's not a good pass blocker. Liam Cohen himself said a couple of weeks ago that, yeah, we really like Tank, but he needs to work on his blitz pickup so we're not predictable when he's on the field. And I just talked about how they're aiming to not be predictable. And then, you get Bashaw Tuden, who I think, offers the best of both worlds of ETN and Bigsby. He can get downhill. He has really good contact balance. Like he had a blazing 40 time, but I've been impressed by his ability to grind out yards after contact and really be a punishing runner. And he can also catch the ball out of the backfield and has some promising reps as a pass protector. And then the Quint Allen, their 7th round rookie, is the best pass blocker of the group. He started getting reps with the ones simply as the third down back. So you have 4 guys who all do things really well, but they're also flawed in a sense. But I think if I had to guess on who the guy who's going to be the focal point of the room is in week 1, and I do think it'll be mostly a committee, but I think even in a committee, you can have a guy kind of leading the charge. I think it's going to be ETN just because I think you can do more with them on the field. You can create more mismatches. And yeah, everybody's going to get their chance to do a little bit of something, but I think ETN, definitely had a strong training camp and kind of, did what he could to, show his value to this new regime.
What about this defense should scare the Panthers, should worry the Panthers? Who are the 2 or 3 guys they have to game plan for?
I think the first 2 guys, that has to be Josh Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker. I personally think Hines Allen is the Jaguars' best player. He's, in my opinion, a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL. Trayvon, he's a guy who nationally, he's not Aiden Hutchinson, so he'll always be known as the guy they picked instead of Aiden Hutchinson. But to his own credit, he has seen his pressures and pressure rate go up each of the last 2 seasons, double-digit sacks in the last 2 seasons. Is he a perfect, complete player who's like a game-changer type? Maybe not, but he can certainly, be a handful for an opposing offensive line. And they're, from the looks of it, they're planning to be a little more versatile with him this year too. They've said for literally his entire career that, yeah, we're going to start letting him play inside, and he never has. Well, you've actually started seeing it with this new regime. So I think those are the 2 guys to start with. And then I think outside of them, at corner, Tyson Campbell and Jordan Lewis have been, had a really strong training camp. Tyson's whole thing has always been, can he stay healthy? When healthy, he's been a really good player. He had a fantastic 2022 where he played the whole year, looked like a Pro Bowl caliber corner. And then the last 2 years, he's just been injured on and off. Even when he's been active, you can tell he's just not 100%. And he even dealt with an injury earlier this preseason. He's fine now, but it's just something to watch. But when he's on and healthy, he's really long. He's really athletic, does a great job of reading quarterbacks and reading route concepts. He's really physical, can run with anybody. He's a tough guy to get by. And then Jordan Lewis, I think, when they signed him this offseason, a lot of people, myself included, kind of shrugged at it, just kind of saw it as signing another, nickel corner, which, there are a couple of dozen of those you can find in the NFL. But he had probably the best training camp of any defender not named Josh Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker. His ability to disrupt the ball, his ability, as a blitzer, his physicality, it all really shines. So I think the 2 corners and the 2 edges are really on defense, where they make their money.
And then finally, John, what's your outlook for this game? What's your prediction? Who wins? And also tell the folks where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one because I really see them as 2 similar teams. I mean, you have 2 really young head coaches. You have 2 quarterbacks who are former number 1 picks who, people still are kind of wanting to see them have that breakout this year. You have 2 really young weapons at wide receiver who everybody's anticipating to see. You have defenses who have added a lot of pieces who, are coming off really struggling years. To me, who wins the game, I think it will come down to who can support their quarterback the best, both in terms of protection and running the ball. I think that the Jaguars' offensive line is their biggest question mark coming into the season. And, the Panthers' defensive line, they obviously added several guys this offseason. I'm interested to see how that matchup goes. And then the same on the flip side. I think the Jaguars' defensive line against the Panthers' offensive line. I know it's a much different offensive line from 2 years ago, but I remember watching that game live 2 years ago, and the Jaguars were just, able to completely tee off on them. I don't think it'll be that easy this time because the Panthers they didn't support Bryce Young at all in that game. He was kind of sent out there to fend for himself. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it'll come down to the fourth quarter. My early gut, I'll go Jaguars 24, Panthers 20. I could see it going either way though. I'm not married to that whatsoever.
I'm with you there. So, John, where can they find you on social media? Obviously, you're doing great work on SI, Jaguars on SI. Where can we all find you?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You can find me on X at Jaguars on SI is our site, and you can also find me at _John_Shipley. I'm aware the double underscore is a mistake, but John Shipley up in Minnesota got the app by about 20 or 30 years on me. So hat tip to him.
Well, John, thanks for joining us, and I will see you this weekend.
Hey, thanks for having me, pal.
And that was a really interesting conversation, I think, from John's perspective. I think John, if you're watching this, you can see how much I was shaking my head. I do feel like these teams are kind of in the same boat together. They're both trying to climb out of the NFL abyss. They are both teams who have invested a lot in quarterbacks, and their head coaches inherited them, and they're still young play callers. Oh, by the way, Liam Cohen replaced Dave Canales in Tampa Bay. There's just like a lot of connective tissue, but also a lot of, similar things among these groups. I think where the Jaguars really jump out is their pass rush, because the Panthers pass rush is bought and paid for while the Jaguars is developed, and they're a little bit further in their development than the two rookies that the Panthers drafted this year. And they're more known in their system probably than you would say Patrick Jones or DJ Wanham. And with this offensive line stuff, that's where I'm kind of, all over the place. But anyway, we're recording this on a Tuesday. Today we published a story that Alex, Scott Fowler, and I all collaborated on. We do it every year. It's predicting the 2025 season. You can check it out on charlotteobserver.com, a wonderful website. And so I figured it'd be fun. We're not going to give everything away. You should go. We'll link this in the article, in this on YouTube. But Alex and I are going to go through a couple of categories that I wanted to talk about. Alex, you had the Panthers going 6-11. You had the Panthers going 8-9. I had them going 7-10, and we kind of switched it up from the last time we did some predictions. Now, I was pretty bullish on 8-9, and then they traded Adam Thielen, and I watched the preseason. And I'm not downgrading this team in their talent. I'm not as concerned with the preseason as a lot of other people. I do worry about the immediate growing pains at wide receiver, especially with Jalen Coker out as well. I just kind of feel like the Arizona game to me felt like a really big point for this team going on the road and hopefully winning one of their two road games. We'll get into our predictions later, but I still think that they've got a really good shot of doing that. My concern against a team against like Arizona is this gets into like a back and forth style thing. And then there's a drive where you're like, man, they really could have used Adam Thielen or Jalen Coker there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where the number turned for me. Explain why you kind of turned into a more positive route.
Yeah, perhaps it's a product of just being around Dave Canales a lot more than normal. But man, the optimism in the building, the positivity in the building. I understand that this time of year, good vibes spring eternal, but I don't know. There does seem to feel something different. And that's a vibes question. And I understand that you come to a podcast to hear like certain X's and O's and certain what you think. But like that extra game that I added is just me feeling what's inside the building and then also taking a look at the schedule and saying, well, those first 4 games, the Panthers should go 3-1. They should find a way to go at minimum 2-2. And then the rest of the way, if the Panthers do go 3-1, you got a lot of winnable games in the not necessarily in the middle of the schedule, but you just in pockets of the schedule, you do a lot of winnable games at home. The Miami Dolphins, we don't know how good they're going to be. The Dallas Cowboys just traded away Micah Parsons. The Jets, that question is still up in the air when it comes to Justin Fields. The New Orleans Saints, this team should beat the Saints twice. That's just how it goes. They tend to split with the Falcons. Like just like when you really look at it, yes, they're going to lose to the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they'll probably get their teeth kicked in by the Green Bay Packers and Micah Parsons and this all of a sudden supercharged defense. But like, and that'll be later on. We can litigate that later. But I'm just saying, like, when you look at this schedule, it does feel like 8-9 is a true possibility. And honestly, the way that the Panthers have been talking, yes, they've been flaunting this no expectation sort of thing, but they're kind of being loudly optimistic, like not showboating, but they are saying, hey, this is a chance for, like, we should be able to get out of the losing season doldrums this year. And I still don't have them having a winning record. So the fact that, like, the Observer is all, like, losing record and I'm the most optimistic is interesting. There are a lot of people out there who say that an 8-9 record would be disappointing this year, considering all the things, all the upgrades that the Panthers have made on the offensive side of the ball, and obviously the defensive line. So I understand that on this podcast, I am considered like the eternal optimist, but I don't think that is true. I don't think that is consistent with the rest of the people reporting on this team.
It is. Anyway, so
okay, so hold on. Let's do this for a second. You really think that, I don't know, I don't want to call anybody out by name, but you really think that the rest of the room
I would say the core beat group probably hovers between 7 and 9 wins.
Yeah. Well, and I'm at 8. I'm right in the middle.
Right, but you're talking like 9, so we'll lot you in. Look, I wrote this.
No, I'm 8.
Would it be a surprise to see them win 9 games? Not really, but would it be pretty difficult to pull off? Yes. Let's move on to our offensive and defensive MVPs. When you read this story on CharlotteObserver.com, you'll also get our rookies of the year, our biggest surprises of the season. You picked Bryce Young and Trevin Wallace as your offensive and defensive MVPs. I picked Chuba Hubbard and J.C. Horn as my offensive and defensive MVPs. I'll get into mine quick before I toss it to you. Chuba's the guy that stirs the drink. He is the heartbeat of this team. I honestly was stunned he was not a captain. I know they're going to do this rotating captain thing, but to me, Chuba Hubbard, until Bryce proves that he can do it for a full season, is the face of this franchise, period. He's gotten paid. He's the most productive player from a numbers perspective. I think he's going to be the guy, and I think the offensive line is going to deal with some regression. They played out of their shoes last year. I still think Robert Hunt is a Pro Bowler. I still think Damian Lewis is a phenomenal guard. I think Taylor Moton's going to be stable. I'm concerned about center and left tackle and their viability and their volatility throughout the season. Now, that said, Chuba Hubbard has shown back-to-back years he can run through whatever's in front of him. And I think I'm just going with what I know. J.C. Horn, this is the second time in a row I've picked him as the defensive MVP. He is their most talented player, and I don't know that it's close. I think that when it's all said and done, he is going to make another Pro Bowl, and he will be in the discussion as a top, 5 to 8 corner in the league. I saw that he did not make the top 100 as voted by the players. That was a mistake. Just because he doesn't have the interception numbers doesn't mean that he is not among the elite. Boom, that's my pitch. What do you got, Alex?
Yeah, no, those are 2 really good players. I also think that Chuba is a guy who stirs the drink. But when it comes to this offense, if the Panthers are going to win 8 games, the guy that needs to prove that he is a starter is Bryce Young. The guy that needs we're not even talking about he needs to justify his number 1 overall pick in 2023. He just needs to prove that he is a starter for 18 weeks. There are no more excuses for Bryce Young. They're just not. I don't need to belabor this point. I have said it several times. This wide receiving core is deep. Yes, it doesn't have Adam Thielen, but it is deep with some young talent, including a couple proven guys. However you want to classify Hunter Renfrow and David Moore in this conversation. He is supposedly confident coming after 5 straight games and a pretty good training camp. If Bryce Young can throw for 3,500 yards passing and 15 touchdowns, this team, and fewer than 7 interceptions, he will be like a top 15 quarterback in the league, and the Panthers will be an 8-9 squad. And then my other guy is Trevin Wallace. We are big fans of Trevin Wallace on the show. He is a great blitzer.
Massive fans.
He needs to have a big jump. He needs to have a sophomore jump. And I think the way that things are shaping up for him, he'll be able to do that. I predict that he'll probably be the team's leading tackler once all is done, barring injury.
Perfect. All right, let's quickly get into our X factors and our predictions for this week. I'm going to say the X factor is the man that I know, the straw that stirs the drink, Chuba Hubbard. I think when you're dealing with an injury at left tackle, the best way to service the quarterback is to run. I'm not afraid of the interior of this Jaguars defense, this front seven. I think Chuba Hubbard can have a really strong day in week 1. I'm going to take the Panthers. I don't feel great about it, but I do think they can win this game. I'm going to say Panthers 23, Jaguars 21. Bryce Young does his kind of last-minute heroics and hits Xavier Legette on a slant route to clinch this win.
Wow, so you're essentially saying this is going to shape up like the Eagles game last year, but Legette's going to...
I actually think that that's a very good comp, yes.
I think that my X factor for this game, and I hope this isn't a cop-out, is going to be the defensive line. And really, when I say that, I'm saying Ashawn Robinson, I'm saying Turk Wharton, and Derek Brown. If these guys can stop the run, the Panthers will be in great position to win this game. Force Trevor Lawrence to make a couple plays. Yeah, he was hurt for a lot of last year, but still the team struggled with him at the quarterback position. They got a new play caller in Liam Cohen as the head coach. He is a proven play caller, this whiz kid of a guy, but it's still going to be his first NFL game. If the Panthers can stop the run, and it really comes down to those 3 guys, if the Panthers can stop the run, they can win this game. I took them going 8-9, and I think this is a very winnable game for them. So I too am going to have the Panthers win. If we're gonna have a score attached to it, let's do something like 17-13. Panthers win. I don't think that this is going to be a super high scoring affair, but we'll see. We shall see. If the Panthers win on 3rd down and they win in the turnover battle, I think that's about where it should end up.
If this defense allows either 21 points or 13 points, they should throw
a parade.
Party. Oh my God. Everett should get the key to the city.
Maybe I should bump that up by a touchdown. I don't know. I still haven't made my exact predictions yet in StyledOfTheRiver.com, but
I don't know how another team does not score 2 touchdowns on this team at minimum. But with that said, thanks guys for joining us on the Processing Blue podcast. Send us out, Alex.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to CharlotteObserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
I'll do my best. That's a wrap.